All right. So in our last class, we were talking about communication models, and this class is an introductory session related to models. Inshallah, from next week, we will begin our discussion of models. So this is basically just introductory sessions, like yesterday's class, the last class and today's class as well. This was my first slide that I shared with you, and I told you that a model is essentially a simplified description that comes in a graphic form or in the form of a sketch or a diagram. And a model actually tells you about a piece of reality. It shows main elements that are involved in communication process. Then we started our discussion about different functions of model. I told you that basic function of a model is to put different things in order. And not only that, it also functions to demonstrate different components that are involved in the process of communication. Um, then this was another slide that we discussed last time. When we were discussing about different functions of model, we said that it makes things easier for us to understand, especially things that would otherwise be difficult. And then we talked about heuristic function of models, which was that to let people learn things by themselves, to let people discover things by themselves. So models have this heuristic function. And then we also talked about this idea that models make the prediction of something possible. Now, with that, I am going to, okay, in last class, we also discussed this idea that communication is a complex process. It is a complex process because it involves many components, it involves many elements, and for that, it is important for us to understand what communication is. Since it is a complex process that involves many components, for this reason, we draw models and we try to make communication easier. Now, with this, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to talk about two different situations. There is situation A, and then there is situation B. Situation A is about an information that comes in the form, in descriptive form, that comes in the form of a paragraph. Situation B is description of a process that comes in the form of an equation, let's say, or in the form of uh, a diagram. So what do you think? What situation would be easier for you to understand? Situation A or situation B? I have asked you all a question. I talked about two different situations. In situation A, information comes in the form of a paragraph in descriptive form. In situation B, information comes in the form of an equation in the form of a diagram. Which situation is easier to understand?
With an example.
Situation B or
Yes, ma'am. Situation.
say it again? Is it situation A or situation B which is easier to understand?
Ma'am, situation A will be easier to understand.
And why is that?
Ma'am, as he's telling about the example, it will be easier for us to understand how to solve it.
It gives us the simple information that is easier for us to understand.
What gives you simple information?
Ma'am, example A.
And what is an example A?
Providing simple information which would otherwise be difficult.
Is it a model? Is it a model?
Yes, ma'am, it is a model.
Okay, never mind. Looks like my internet connection is also not stable today. but that's okay. I will wrap up this class as soon as I can. And let's finish our discussion on models. Okay, these are different types of models that we will be learning in this semester. Models can be structural. Structural models are those models that explain the structure of something. And then there are functional models. They basically aim at describing the function of a process. So for example, a model that tells us that media sets agenda for people. It is telling us about a function of media that media performs in our lives. Similarly, a model that says that media affects people in terms of uh, influencing them for their shopping behavior or for their consumption behavior. So that is a functional model, which is telling us about what function media plays in our lives. Then there can be directional models. Directional models are those models that tell us the direction of information, flow of information. Here we will talk about uh, two-step flow model of communication that says that the information actually reaches to audience in two steps. It tells us about steps of information and flow of info, the direction of flow of information. So we will talk about all these sorts of models in our classes, and then these types will become clearer to you. Let's talk about some misuses of models. Okay, what can be some misuses? Okay, models actually tend to confine or limit our scope of thinking. I would ask you to recall my example that I gave you in last class. Remember in last class, I showed you an image that I drew in my notebook. And let me show it to you again. Okay. So do you see this in your screen, on your screen? Does it? Do you all see this?
Yes,
How many components does it have?
4.
Very good. Yeah, four. Now, okay, in in this diagram, I'm showing you a model that has four components. Those four components are from sender to information goes to a medium. From medium, a message is generated and that message further goes to audience, receivers. Okay? Now, this information, the model that I just showed you, it has four components. Whoever is seeing this model, he or she may think that maybe communication is a process that has only four components. And he may completely overlook another component that may be noise. Maybe there is another element of noise. And in so users of models, or sometimes even originators of model, people who originate model, they confine their thinking only to the components of model. That is one of the misuses of model, which means people do not broaden their canvas. They do not broaden the scope of their thinking. That is how people tend to limit the scope of their thinking, and that may be one of the misuses of model, if that makes sense. And this is what I have written here. Sometimes models tend to trap their originators within limited confines. The users may become, so this usually does not happen in the field of communication, but many times users or originators of models, they confine themselves only to the components given within a model. A model may also perpetuate some assumptions, and people again only confine their thinking to those assumptions. What is the meaning of perpetuate? The meaning of perpetuate is to continue. A model may continue some assumptions and people may adhere to those assumptions only without again broadening the scope. The researcher or scholar should be careful about the use of a particular model for his or her study. Here it means that, for example, I am doing my research, which is related to effects of television on TV, and I should be careful that what particular model I should use for my study. And we will talk, if any of this confuses you, you shouldn't be worried about it, because very soon these lectures will become interesting, especially when we will start discussing actual models. And this is something which we are going to do from our next lecture, which will be on Friday. Okay? Okay. Now, this is something that I have already discussed in my last lecture. We talked about this idea that communication is a complex process that involves these components: sender, channel, receiver, message, relationship between sender and receiver, and context. And sometimes there is an intention when information is sent. And I will give you the example of advertising. And advertising, there is an intention. So communicator or advertiser wants audience to buy his product. So there is this intention. So what I am saying is that there is usually an intention in the dissemination of information. However, this is not always necessary. So all of this explains that communication is a complex process, and for that we need to study communication. These are some other elements that the process of communication has. One of you last time gave the example of encoding and decoding that happens in communication, and then there is also this element of feedback. We will talk more about it, inshallah, in our next coming classes. These are just very introductory sessions related to communication models. This is a definition of communication. Uh, uh, I, to me, mass communication is when you communicate with masses using a mass media. For example, using television, using radio, using newspaper. When you are communicating with masses, that kind of communication is known as mass communication. Okay. With this, I have ended this lecture. I wanted to do some important announcements for right in the beginning of the semester. Students, soon after I finished my last lecture on March 15, I uploaded that lecture on Moodle. Every time, like soon after I finish today's lecture, I'm going to upload this lecture too on Moodle. It is not necessary for me to write emails every day to you to let you know that recorded lectures are available on Moodle. They will be always available on Moodle with the name of the date. For example, the lecture that I uploaded on Moodle on March 15, it has the title Recorded Lecture March 15. Today's lecture will have the title Recorded Lecture March 17, and you can find them on Moodle. Okay? And they will be under the same topic that we are discussing. So for example, today's topic was communication models and intro. When you go to Moodle, you will find the same topic, same lecture on Moodle. So I'm not going to write an email to everyone to let everyone know that lecture is there. Another important announcement is that, as you know, I have only 3 exams for this semester. And excuse me, this is something that I have noticed in this past semester. I did not have good experience with online exams. Uh, I, whenever I give an online exam on Moodle, I tell my students to make sure that they do not have connectivity issue during the time of the exam, which means they should charge their devices, which means they should plan for a backup. If you miss your exam for any reason, please let me tell you, there is not a retake. There will not be a retake. Absolutely no retakes. But what I can do is I can give you an oral exam. I consider people case by case. And if anyone comes with a genuine reason, I usually give them oral exam. And I have reasons for giving oral exam. I give oral exam using by phone if they still have, in order to avoid connectivity issues. The student says, well, I had connectivity issue at the time of exam. Okay, fine, I can give them an oral exam using my phone or setting up a Zoom meeting or anything. And also universities policy for especially online learning period emphasizes on oral exams because they minimize teaching. They minimize cheating. We do not want to penalize students who work with honesty and who maintain integrity. So to minimize cheating, the university specially emphasizes oral exams. Also, with online teaching, teachers have so many things to do on their plates, and oral exam makes assessment and everything easy. When I give oral exams to my students, my aim is to assess their understanding. My aim is to assess their conceptuality, and in my experience, an oral exam is a really, really good tool for that. With that, I'm going to assign you a homework for uh, I'm going to stop the sharing of the screen. I'm going to assign you a homework, and that homework I'm going to write in the chat box.
Alert from updates ready to install.
Here is the homework. You may have seen that in the chat box. It says draw a model related to the process of communication in a classroom setting, in-person classroom setting. Any questions? Another instruction is be creative about your drawing and try to entail if I were you, what I would do is I would draw an imaginary. So, for example, if I do this really, really quick for you, how would I do this? Can I get a pencil? Can I get the pencil? Give me a minute. Okay. Do you see this picture? Is it, does it give any idea? Okay. Let me show you this one by one. This is the classroom setting. I have made this imaginary figure, which is teacher. You see this board at like a square. I have written visual communication. So this board at the back of the teacher represents visual communication. It means the board that I usually use in class to show my projector, or the board that I usually use in my class as a whiteboard. So teacher, and then I draw these arrows that go to these boxes. Do you see these boxes here? These boxes represent students. So the flow of communication is from teacher to students. This is flow of communication. But you can make arrows that go toward teacher as well to describe that the flow of communication can be from students to teachers as well. Similarly, and this side of this drawing, you see a square that represents noise. This is the entrance of the class. Usually during the class, if a student enters, that kind of creates distraction for other people to listen to the message, or that breaks the flow, smooth flow of communication. So this door works as a noise. This model, the model that I have drawn here is very subjective. You know the meaning of subjective. We discussed this in detail at the beginning of the class. So this is my interpretation. What is your interpretation of a communication model that happens in classroom setting, only in face-to-face setting? I'm asking you to draw a model related to that. And here, be creative. When you are done with it, you will upload your model on Moodle. It will be just one page. It doesn't have to be, you do not have to draw it on computer, or it doesn't have to be typewritten. You can draw it by hand, just like I did. Okay? And what I'm asking you is to be creative. Think about who is sender, think about who is receiver, think about what can be the barrier, what can be the noise, think about think about what can be the medium in classroom setting. What is the medium? Usually the medium is air. Until and unless there is a mic given with the rostrum. Also another medium is board, whiteboard or projector board. That is visual, that is the medium of visual communication. So think about message, think about medium, think about sender, think about receiver, think about noise, think about feedback. There are so many components that you can think, and then be creative. Once it is a homework that will require maximum 30 minutes attention. Actually, you can even do it in 15 to 20 minutes. Draw it on a piece of paper, write in clear and legible handwriting. Once you are done with it, please go ahead and upload it on Moodle. On Moodle, under the folder Communication Models and Intro, I will create a link. You will find a link where you can upload this picture. Take a picture and just upload a screenshot there. You do not need to send me email. Please do not send me emails. Okay? I will randomly go to some people's models to see what they have drawn. And I can also, we will have discussion on your models in class, and I can pull up some models from there to discuss them in class. And I can turn on my screen sharing feature, and that is how I can share it with everyone. A very important announcement. This activity is not graded. This activity I will repeat, and I'll write it in the chat box as well. This activity is not graded. We are doing this only for learning and only to as a kickoff session for your creativity. This is not graded. Any question?